10th grade. I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and if you see, I am not in our usual classroom setup, but rather I'm in a laboratory with something that is fuming behind me, right? And if you think about it, scientists, especially scientists, are super curious to know and to, which leads them to doing a lot of discoveries, and they're extremely inquisitive. Which is why today, when we start off this journey, we're going to be a little curious about what happened before, what is happening now, and we will set our foundation strong so that we can get started with the chapter that we have with us, which is the fundamental unit of life. So I want all of you to grab your imaginary lab coats, put it in, and be ready for today's ride, because trust me, it's going to be a beautiful story that we will be learning together. And as you can see, I have my lab coat on, which means it's time to go for a spin, and I hope all of you here are ready for today's class. Yes? So in this video, of course, we will be learning a lot about cell, right? But before I get started with talking about cells and what they are, we must go on a journey, and this journey will start from the present day condition. Now I want all the students to take a minute and observe what you see right behind me. Take a minute and get started and start observing the things. Now when you are observing, you must be observing things like, the water, right? Beautiful water bodies. We have clouds, we have atmosphere. Then along with that, I can see beautiful green plants way back in the vicinity, some beautiful mountains that are there. Now this, of course, is a beautiful sight of nature in the year 2023. But my question to you is, let's say I go back a few years, maybe a few hundred years or maybe a few thousand years. More or less, you will find water, you will find air, you will find plants, right? But maybe the quality of it would probably be quite different from how it is right now. But what if I don't go back just a few thousand years, but I go back a few million years? Way back, before there was any life on Earth. There was no life on Earth at that time. So how do you think Earth looked when there was absolutely no life? So we're going to rewind a little bit, and it actually looked something like this. Now can you imagine our beautiful planet Earth looking like this, getting bombarded by asteroids, right? And we saw that it's very hot here, and we see that the temperatures are not very ideal for survival. Yes, a lot of you are saying volcanoes as well. Now this is of course 3.5 billion, but to be honest, the record is between 4 to 4.6 millions that are there. And we saw a lot of minerals that were also formed around this time. So very high temperatures, not very ideal for survival. But what happened was that over time, there were a lot of asteroids which were coming and hitting our planet, and we saw that eventually it led to the formation of water, it led to the formation of the kind of atmosphere we have, then it also led to formation of certain compounds, right, or certain chemical substances that were there. Like I could say that we had sugars, carbohydrates, a lot of organic molecules, a lot of inorganic molecules. And eventually what we saw was that once all the basic components like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, all of them were available, chemical compounds started forming in. And when chemical compounds started forming in, they started coming closer and closer, right? They started to aggregate, right? Or they started to form into one, yes? And if you see, they formed something of this sort. Now what is this? What did it do? We are not going to really give it a name, because these are all speculations, right? We can't go back in history and see what this really was. These are speculations. These are assumptions that this is probably how it happened, right? We're not saying that this is exactly how it happened, because still a lot of discovery and research is happening, but they're assuming that this is what probably happened a few million years ago. Yes? Now what they saw was this was an aggregate of various chemical compounds, okay? Various chemical substances had come together and they formed something. Now this something, right, let's call it maybe X, right? Let's call this structure as X. This structure started showing certain abilities. I won't say function, but it started showing some abilities. For example, It started feeding on things around us, around it, I mean. So what happened? There were some other, organic compounds like maybe carbohydrates or maybe some proteins or whatever it is. This thing would go and it would engulf it. And what they saw was that this had the ability to probably break it down, right? Probably break that down and produce energy. And it was using this energy to do various other chemical reactions within itself. And along with that, we also saw that not only was it able to get, or it was utilizing other components as food, it was also producing energy. Now along with this, whatever it did not require, it was throwing it out of his body as well. It's like, you know what, outside that, X structure that was there, it was throwing it out. Now the very interesting thing that was there is that it was not just one such structure. X right here made multiple copies of itself, right? That means that almost like Xerox copies, it was making more and more. That means it was expanding. Now what does this mean? It means that it has the ability here to create copies. Now this structure X, over time, over millions and millions of years, underwent so many changes to form the structure that we know today, which is cell, the fundamental unit of life. So with this beautiful story of what happened a few millions of years ago, we're going to appreciate how on what we are going to learn today, right? We started this class quite differently. I did not start it the usual way where I tell you what we're going to study about. We started with a story. Now, how many of you will remember this story? Now, all of you know how the cell is going to come from, right? Exactly. So, first and foremost, we must use this time to appreciate it. Yes? So today's class is going to be all about what is this cell, and we're going to have a quick introduction into understanding the fundamental unit of life. So now, of course, right, what are we learning today? We're going to be learning about what is this fundamental unit of life, and we're going to go into the details of it, right? Then we're going to go on and understand why cells are defined as a structural and functional unit. Then we're going to talk about what are the functions of cell and why they are microscopic. And we will talk about the discovery of cells and cell shape and size. Now, I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and I will be kickstarting this particular chapter, fundamental unit of life. I hope all of you are excited for today. Now, of course, earlier I went into a storyteller mode, but I'm going to switch into my teacher mode where now I'm going to be teaching you about this. So are we all excited for today's class? For those of you who are very new, you're attending this particular class for the first time, I will take a minute of your time to tell you about ongoing SHIKHAR series, where as a part of making sure that you are at the top, we will be teaching you. Yes? So I'm your biology teacher. You also have Ankita ma'am who will be teaching you fundamental unit of life as well, and we welcome you to BYJU'S 9 and 10. Let me tell you that BYJU'S 9 and 10 is far different from any other platform that you go to, or rather BYJU'S is quite different, because we don't believe that learning should happen in one way, right? The cliche manner where we tell you what is cell, we go ahead with maybe giving you some examples. But rather, when you learn any concept, understanding it through visuals and stories and understanding the history behind it, you go on to appreciate more and more about it. Which is why I request all of you to make sure that you go ahead and hit the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button. We need to make sure that we spread this video to as many of our friends as possible, because best education is deserved by all, which is why I need you to make sure you share this video. So everybody, I welcome you to this class, and of course, let me set out a few basic rules. I've already told you what we're learning today, and if you think about it, they are very basic concepts, right? These are all the basics that you should know whenever you are learning cell, because if your basics are not strong, trust me, it's going to be very difficult when you are going to be studying in your higher grades, right? And let me tell you another thing. You know that CBSE has now started focusing on competency-based questions. Now, if you are not able to have conceptual clarity, later on, understanding and having competency and solving such questions are going to be difficult. Which is why in this particular class, when I will be taking class, I will first deal with a particular concept. Alright, so I'm going to deal with a certain concept, and I'm going to elaborate and teach it to you properly. But I may not take your doubts as I am teaching because I want to focus on teaching, which means that I need you to have the following things ready with you. Please have your notebooks, right? Please have your textbooks open with you. Yes, and also make sure you have a pen or a pencil along with some water as well, because it's summer season and hydration is important. Now the second thing is, if I don't take your doubts at the moment, it does not mean that I'm not listening to you or I'm ignoring you. But I need you to focus, and I will tell you that I will do a doubt board. So for those students who are watching this video much later after the live stream is done, this is for all of you as well, to help you all out, so that wherever the doubt board section comes, you can just skip that part and go to the parts where I'm teaching you. Yes, so I need your attention and full-fledged attention here, because we are going to get started. So very quickly everybody, hope you are all ready, and let's start. Now when we talk about fundamental unit of life, right, and I'm going to talk about life in general. Now when we talk about life, we talk about human beings, we talk about growth, and we talk about so many things, yes? But you just think about it. How do we start our journey in this world? We start off as a baby, then we see that we undergo so many changes, right? So if I were to rewind this video, we start our journey as a baby, right? Then we grow into becoming, young adults that you all are now. We become an adult, and eventually we progress into old age. But if I rewind back a little bit, right? I'm going to go back a little bit. You see that even for a baby to be formed, right, we know that this baby, or any baby as a matter of fact, starts its journey of life as a single cell structure, right? So this right here is what we call as a single celled structure, which means, what is this cell, and why do we call it as the fundamental unit of life? Now let's understand why we call this chapter as fundamental unit of life, right? So let's see. Fundamental, right? So I'm not going to tell you this is what is fundamental, this is what is life. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it to you with an example. So I'm going to give you a task, okay? I need all of you out there who's watching this video to write your name, okay? Now I'm specifying, saying write your name, yes? Now, if you have to write your name, and I say that you have to write it in a piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to tell you have to write it in a piece of paper. What will you say? You're like, okay, ma'am, you have given me the piece of paper. I need a pen, and I'm going to write my name. So I'm going to write Aishwarya. Well and good, right? Simple. But what if I tell all of you that you have to write your name in a piece of paper, but you cannot, right? You cannot use ink. You cannot use ink, but you have to write your name. Yes, you have to write your name in a piece of paper. You'll be like, Arey ma'am, what is this? How can I write my name in a piece of paper without really using ink? It is not going to be possible, right? No using pencil, nothing. No pencil, no pen, no ink, nothing. So basically, whatever basic units are there, I said no pen, no pencil. All of you are very smart, saying ma'am, pencil I will use. Okay. So in this case, right, let's understand the analogy that if I don't give you a base, right, if I don't give you the most basic thing I need, it will be very difficult. So in this case, what do we understand? When we say fundamental unit, it means that we are talking about the basic unit that is there. Now let's move on to the word unit. What does unit mean? It's very simple, right? So when I say unit, think about what is a book made of? What is a book made of? Can you all tell me in the live chat? And for those of you watching it later, you can think about it, right? How is it that, or what is a book made of? Books are made up of many pages, right? And what are your pages made of? Your pages are made up of paper. So basically, a unit of a book. So the thing that is making up the book are pages or paper. So that is what we mean by unit. So we see that fundamental means something base that is there, the base that is there, or what is the basic thing. Unit is the individual thing that makes it up. And last but not the least, we have life. And we know what is life. Life talks about all the living organisms that are there. Which means that the fundamental unit of life, or the most basic unit that makes up all living organisms, are nothing but the cells, right? So we saw that cells are considered to be the fundamental unit of life, or we say that it is the basic unit of life. Now, there are various definitions of cell. You can define cell as the fundamental unit of life. We see that cells can be defined as the basic unit of life. Then we can say that cells can be defined as the structural and functional unit of all living organisms. But the thing is, whenever we learn about cells, and now that we're studying about chemistry, we're learning about a lot of things, most often than not, right? All of you get confused with, ma'am, you have cells, okay? Then you have something called as atoms. Then you have something else called as molecules. This has been an eternal doubt with every batch of students who come to 9th standard and learn more. How many of you have this doubt? Ma'am, what is the difference between an atom, a cell, and a molecule? I mean, they all pretty much sound the same, right? How is all these things quite different? And if cell is microscopic and you have atoms also, which is smaller, cell is smaller or atom is smaller, cell is smaller or molecule is smaller. So most often than not, we tend to have this kind of a confusion, and most of you here have that. So let's understand one by one. Now the image in itself is going to diagrammatically represent what is what. But when you define an atom, right, we say that this is the smallest part of a substance that cannot, I'll add, at the moment, right, that may or may not be broken down chemically, right? So they cannot, I would say that is the smallest part of a certain substance. For example, if I take nitrogen, right, so this right here, a single nitrogen atom is there, right? So this is a nitrogen atom. Now the thing is, when I move on, right, so let's say that if I take two atoms, right, so if two or more atoms come together, we see that this right here forms a molecule, right? So we see that this right here forms a molecule. So this right here, if you see N and N gives me nitrogen molecule that is there, sorry. It gives you nitrogen molecule. Now the thing is, you have nitrogen molecule that is there. But what is your cell made up of? Your cell is made up of carbohydrates, right? Your cell is made up of proteins. Yes, your cell is made up of various organic molecules that I already discussed with you. Yes, which means that your cell is made up of different molecules altogether. Yes, so now we know what is the difference between an atom, a molecule, and a cell. Yes or no, right? Yes or no? Are we all clear about what is an atom, what is a molecule, and what is a cell, and how they are all different from one another? So atom is the smallest part of a substance. Atoms come together to form molecules. Various molecules will come together to form your cell. It's as simple as that. But again, we're going to come back to a very important question. Why is cell called as the basic unit? Okay, let's start with the simplest thing on why cell is the basic unit. So for that, I don't like telling you with words, right? I want you to show it with examples. So I'm going to switch my screen and I'm going to show you with the easiest example that you can do at home. So can we switch screens, please? Okay. Everybody, I need your focus here. Okay, yes. Now in the meanwhile, right, as I keep going on and on, as before I go ahead and I change my screen, for a lot of you who are asking me, ma'am, is Menti available today? Menti will not be available, so I'm just letting you know. And in the meanwhile, for all of you who are here watching this live, please make sure you go ahead and you hit the like button on this video as well if you are enjoying what we're doing so far. Alright, so I hope all of you here are able to see my screen. I may get cut in between, but don't mind that, right? So we will adjust it in the meanwhile, okay? So are you all able to see my screen and you're able to see this beautiful pyramid that is there? I think I'll move it a little bit this side so that you are all able to see. Yes, very good everybody. Screen is good to go. Thank you. So now the structure that you see, right, is a pyramid. Yes or no? This is all made up of, it is a pyramid that we have tried to make. Now the thing is, if you see, this pyramid is made up of multiple units. So this right here, what I have lifted up is a unit. Now if you think about it, the basic unit, so I need all of you to listen to me. The basic unit, or what is actually making this pyramid up, is this block, this wooden block that you see. So you can imagine your cells to be the basic unit that makes up any living organism, right? So we see that that is why we call it as the basic unit. Now I told you that cells can also be defined as the basic structural and functional unit. So that is the second point. So when we define a cell, we say cell is the basic structural and functional unit. So let's understand why we say structural unit. Now you imagine, what shape does this have? This right here has a shape of a pyramid. Now the reason being is that I have arranged all these blocks, right? I have arranged all these blocks in that shape. Now if I remove all of this down, is it any more a pyramid? Yes or no? Is the shape pyramid or a triangular shape? I'll not say pyramid because it's dimensional, so I will rephrase and say triangular. Yes? I have removed some of the blocks. So it no longer has it, right? Now if I move it, it would have something of this sort. So can I say that because of the way the cells were arranged? Yes, I'm going to put it back. So the way the cells were arranged, we see that because of this, it is getting its structure. Yes? Now you can see, right? This is the reason why we call it as so, right? Why we call it as the structural unit. Now the next thing is we say that it is the functional unit. Now in this case, we know that it is able to stand in this manner, right? It is able to stand in this manner because of how the structure, the unit is shaped as. Now you imagine, instead of this, I had a tissue paper, okay? I had this tissue paper with me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it into a square, alright? So I'm just going to simply fold it into a square like this. Same, this is also square on one side. And I'll move this to the side so that you can see better. So you have one which is a wooden block, and you have another which is a tissue paper, a tissue paper cutout which is there. Now in this case, if I make many such tissue paper cutouts and I make it stand one on top of the other, do you think it's going to stand? I need a yes or no from you. Many such tissue paper cutouts, if I stack it next to each other, imagine I'm putting it like this, right? So, okay, maybe I'm going to do something of this sort, right? So imagine if I'm putting it, it's not going to stand. So even if I take 25, 30, 45 of it, it's not going to stand. But the reason why this wooden block was able to stand and I was able to make this pyramid structure was not only because of its shape, but also because it was providing sturdity, like it's providing that sturdiness, yes? And as a result, the function it serves is that it gives a good foundation. It gives a good base. Very good, Yashwanti, very good. So in this case, if you see, every unit that is there, right? Every unit is not just giving a structure, but it is giving a function in this case. Now, shall we understand this a little more with respect to cells in our body or in living organisms? So we're going to switch back to understand this better. So can we please switch back? Okay. So now I want all of you in the live chat to tell me if you have understood this well. For those of you who are watching this much later in the video, you can also drop a thumbs up in the comments of this video to let me know if you understood this very well. So I'm just going to extrapolate this concept a little bit more on understanding about why we say that a cell is said to be the structural and functional unit. Now, first and foremost, we call it just as the basic unit of life because we see that all these cells that are there, right? We know that cells have the cells that are there provide the structure and functional unit. I'm going to get back to that point in just a bit. Now, if I take a leaf, right? So I'm going to take a leaf. Now, what is the leaf? Leaf has this kind of a shape. But why does leaf have this kind of shape? Because we see that there are cells, right? So we see that there are many cells which are there that have the ability or that come together and give it its structure. Yes? So we see that this right here is giving it its structure. And that's why the leaf is shaped like this. Similarly, you take our case, right? You take our hands, you take our bones, you take anything. It's because of the cells that are there and not just one type of cell, cell, but many such cells which are arranged to give it the structure. Now, the second thing that you need to understand is the function. Yes? Now, what is the function of the leaf? What is a simple function? We know that leaves are said to be the food factories, right? So we call them as the food factories, or we know that they are responsible for, doing photosynthesis. Now, when I say that the leaf is doing photosynthesis, what is exactly doing photosynthesis? Is it the leaf or the cells of the leaf that are doing photosynthesis? Take a minute to understand. When I say that leaves do photosynthesis, at the end of the day, what is actually doing photosynthesis? They are the cells of the leaf which are carrying out this function. And collectively, when all of them do photosynthesis, at the end of the day, it says that the leaf is doing it. Kind of like what happens in our body also. So when you think about it, every cell that is there, it carries out certain set of functions. And that's why if you see, right, cell is said to be the basic unit because it is an entity that can independently exist. That means it's not like there is something that is there which is it's not like there is a basic unit of the cell also, right? I mean, of course, components are there, but at the end of the day, the cell is what is independently existing. But all the cells in especially our body or in plants, they're all working together, which is why at the end of the day, we say leaf is doing this, root is doing this, stem is doing this, right? Now, at the same time, right, we know that it plays a very important role for all of the life processes. That means that it is responsible for carrying out functions which are necessary to stay alive, or I can say it is responsible for survival, right? So this right here is important. So what are these functions that are necessary for survival? So if you think about it, growth is one such function, right? So we know that cells that are there, they have the ability to grow. That means increase in number and help us with growth. Then we know that various other functions that are there include repair. So I'm just going to use this. So whenever our body is damaged, for example, if this is my hand, right? So if this is my hand and I get a cut here, now we know that the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to start bleeding, right? All the blood is going to come out. Now what happens? Eventually this cut that is there is going to get closed. So if you think about it, here we saw that cell growth and repair is happening. And along with that, you know that cells have the ability to produce energy, right? So if they have to do all of these functions of growth and development and everything, they need to produce energy, right? So they need energy to survive. And along with that, we know that they have the ability to utilize food as well. So whatever, when you say digestion and everything that happens, all those nutrients, whether it is your glucose, right, or whether it is your amino acid or whatever it may be, at the end of the day, they need to reach the cells, right? And inside the cells is where they will get utilized. Now, at the same time, another thing that you need to understand is that apart from this, it also does various other functions, right? It gets rid of unwanted substances and there are specific structures which help in all of this. Then we know that whether it's movement of substances, it takes place inside the cell. So, if you think about it, cells carry out various functions, right? But one thing to remember is that these various functions are such which are essential for survival. So that is going to be your key takeaway, right? So now, of course, before I go ahead with the next part, any doubts that you have so far, or are we all clear, right? Are we all clear? I took half an hour to explain one of the most important things that you need to understand. If your basics are clear on this, trust me, you are sorted for forever, I would say. Ma'am, cell is made up of water, but why don't we feel it? That's a very good question. See, even though our body is made up of almost 70% water, I would tell you one thing, right? It's not water that you see, that you drink. It is in a fluid form that is there. So your cytoplasm has water content, but it's in kind of a fluid form. So we don't really feel it, right? So that is one thing. That, ma'am, is cell made up of atoms? Yes, Anushri, it's made up of many atoms. Prarthana, microscope diagram is important for observation. Yes, water will be, extra water that is there will be stored in the vacuole as well. Okay, ma'am, will something happen to our cells if we get disease? Very good question, Vaishnavi. So let me tell you, Sometimes due to certain bacteria or maybe certain viruses, some of the cells can get damaged, right? Or sometimes they will get destroyed as well. But that doesn't mean that our body has only fixed number of cells. No, if certain cells gets damaged, they will be replaced as well by cell growth and cell division, which we will learn more and more in the later session today. Can a cell fix itself? See, cells have mechanism wherein they make sure that they're functioning perfectly, right? The cells in our body need to remain perfect, because if there's abnormal growth of cells, that is also dangerous, which eventually leads to cancer, right? So that is something that you need to understand. Ma'am, are all cells in... Just give me one moment. I think I missed a question. Ma'am, are all cells in different plant body parts different like us humans? Yes, we have different kinds of cells in plants as well, right? You have epidermal cells, you have xylem cells. Xylem in itself is made up of 4-5 cells. So there are different types of cells which carry out different functions as well. Ma'am, can a foreign cell grow in our body? Most often than not, they cannot, because our body will immediately detect it and get rid of it. But most often than not, no. But viruses and some bacteria can be considered foreign, and they are cells, so they can tend to grow. Why is cell called structural and functional unit? I have repeated. I've already told you. It gives it the structure, right, of the leaf, and if leaf performs photosynthesis, it's effectively the cells performing photosynthesis. Plasma membrane and details I will not go into today. I'm just giving you an introduction. We will be taking it later in our sessions. Ma'am, why isn't an atom the See, good question. If atom is the smallest thing, why is atom not the fundamental unit of life? Let me go back to the story I told you. There were various organic compounds that were formed way back then. But see, individually, they're all non-living, because they don't, grow, reproduce. They don't, produce energy, like, produce for, various other processes. They don't have characteristics of life. But when they all come together and they are inside the cell, that is when life originates. Which is why when we say fundamental unit of life, it is cell. Okay? Alright, so I can see most of this. What is a cell made up of? I've already discussed this. What is done by a cell when we get a cut? See, when we get a cut, first and foremost, clotting happens to make sure that blood doesn't go. Then we see that repair takes place, and new skin cells are generated to make sure that it closes the barrier. Okay, so now of course with this I'm going to go to the ancient history of cell. Now, this is what your textbook starts with, right? Your textbook starts with this particular topic, with the discovery of cell. Now, it is not that everybody knew for a very long time, like ever since human nature, or I would say human beings, started to think and, started to be more, advanced with thinking and everything. They're like, yes, cell is the thing, or cell is the basic unit of life. It did not start that way. It took a lot of discovery, lot of theories, lot of contemplation. First, they thought it was something else. Then they realized, oh my God, you know what? It's actually not that. It's something else altogether. So if you think about it, the first person who discovered cells, right? And I would say who coined the term cell as well was Robert Hooke in the year 1665, right? And what did he observe? He observed dead cork cells under the microscope. Now, cork is basically the structure that makes up the bark of a tree, and when he observed it under a microscope, I'm going to draw this here. So when he observed it under a microscope, he saw that it reminded him of some honeycomb-like structure. Yes, so it reminded him of a honeycomb-like structure, and it reminded him of the compartments in a monastery, which is why the term cell came into the picture. But of course, he observed dead cells. But the person who observed living cells for the first time was Anton van Leeuwenhoek. And Anton van Leeuwenhoek observed living cells and he saw them moving, which is why he called it as animalcules, right? I hope I'm getting that right. He called it as animalcules as well. Now, Anton van Leeuwenhoek has a very interesting history. I think I would have told you about it, but if I've not told you before, I'm going to tell you once again. Anton van Leeuwenhoek was not a scientist. He was actually a textile vendor. So he was actually into the business. He was a businessman. Yes, he was a businessman and he was just very curious about things. So when he built the first simple microscope, if you see, he was the one who built the first simple microscope. And he only built it because he wanted to know how the cloth would look like under the microscope, which is why he started building it. And when he started observing different cloth, different textures, right? And when he went looking more and more into it, he then started observing, pond water and everything like that. And that's when he looked and he observed the living cells for the first time. Then of course another one that you need to know and remember is Purkinje. Now Purkinje was somebody who discovered or coined the term protoplasm. Now protoplasm refers to all the living components of the cell. Now see, don't get worried telling ma'am what is protoplasm, what is cytoplasm. I know these questions will come, more. A lot of you will ask me this question telling ma'am protoplasm, ma'am cytoplasm. I don't know the difference. Don't worry, we're going to be doing and taking it up in the later videos. But for now, all we need to do is to know that Purkinje discovered this. Now, one more scientist that you need to know, right, is Robert Brown. Now, Robert Brown, that is there, was the one who discovered the nucleus. So, you need to know this as well. Now, in your lower grades, of course, you would have just learnt about Robert Hooke. But now you have Leeuwenhoek, you have Purkinje, you have Robert Brown, and you have three other scientists who coined the whole concept of cell theory. Now, these are very, very important scientists, right? These scientists are Matthias Kleeden, right? Theodor Schwann and Rudolf Virchow. Now, their contributions in the field of cell biology, right, the study of cell is what we call as cell biology or cytology, is very, very prominent. Because today, if I am here standing in front of you telling that cell is the basic unit of life, cell is the structural unit of life, or cell is the functional unit, yes? And I'm telling you that every cell arises, right? A cell is able to reproduce. That means tomorrow if I want a new cell, I'm actually going to get it from a cell which is reproducing. Now that I am able to tell you all of this, right? The only reason that I am able to stand here and tell you this is because of their contribution. So in this case, what did they say? Simple, whatever I told you. Kleeden proposed that all living organisms are made up of cells or are the products of cells. Now Schwann said that, they are the fundamental building blocks and, they are the ones that make it up. And Virchow added much later stating that new cells arise from pre-existing cells. Or I'll give you a simpler version of cell theory, right? So what is cell theory? Cell theory can be simply defined as a cell is the basic structural unit of life. A cell is the basic functional unit, right? And you can add how all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Yes? And last but not the least, you can also add in on how all living organisms are made up of cells. So simple, all living organisms are made up of cells, cell is structural and functional unit, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. That means that no cell will form in a new manner. Okay, you will not be like, okay, if you have 5 cells in your body, suddenly one 6th cell will come as some new formed product. No, if a cell has to come, it will come from a pre-existing cells itself. And this is important because in your examination, this can come for 3 marks. It is there in your textbook. You can put a star mark next to it. Yes? So now, of course, with this, we have learnt about the postulates of cell theory, right? We have learnt about the postulates. Now we will move on to a little bit more on cellular functions that are there. Now let me tell you, we've learned so much about cell function, cell structure, so much about the basics of it. But is my body, right? Let's take the body of humans, right? Is my body just made up of one single cell and one type of cell? Yes or no for both of these questions, right? Is it that my body is just made up of one single cell and it has only one type of cell? Yes? Absolutely not. First and foremost, our body is made up of many cells, which is why we are said to be multicellular organisms. While there are some organisms which are just made up of one single cell, and we call them as unicellular organisms. And even if our body is made up of many cells, we see that there are various types of cells in our body as well. So if you think about it, there are different cells which have different shapes, different sizes. Now why do cells have different shape and size? Why can't I just have one single cell, one unit of block that I can just build anything out of it? Why should I have different things? It's because our body is made up of so many types, right? So we see that our body has to carry out so many different functions. So to carry out the function, it has the shape that it has. Now very quickly, if a cell has an elongated shape, like in the case of a neuron, what would the function be, right? What function would it serve? Now we know that in this particular shape, we know that especially because of their elongated function, it helps in carrying, because of its elongated structure, it's able to carry out the function. And what is this function? It is transmission of impulses, or I will say transmission of electric signals, right? Or transmission of electric information. So because of it, we see that it is able to communicate it quick and fast. Now next up, we have a biconcave shape which we see in RBCs, right? So this we saw in neuron, and then we saw biconcave shape in RBCs. Now what is the function of RBC? Function of RBC is to transport oxygen. So we see that in our body there are two things, right? First and foremost, we have so many RBCs in our body. So it needs to be accommodated in the blood, right? So they have that disc-like structure or a biconcave structure so that many RBCs can be accommodated. And secondly, so that it can efficiently transport more oxygen to different parts, we see that it has this kind of structure. Then of course we see here that we have a spindle shaped structure which we see in smooth muscles, okay? So we see this in muscles. Now in this case we know that in order for, contracting and relaxing and to, go with to carry that function out efficiently, we see that it has a spindle shaped structure. And last but not the least, there are some cells which are polygonal, like how we observe in maybe liver. So basically when you think about it, right, we see that different cells have different shapes to carry out their respective function efficiently. Yes, this is the reason. Now this point here is very important because first and foremost you can get MCQs out of this, you can get assertion reason questions based on this, and of course you can get true or false questions as well. So this right here is very important. Now I'm going to finish this class by asking you a question. Now living organisms, right? Living organisms that are there, they're all made up of cells, and now we know why. But are there some exceptions? Are there cells or are there structures which blur the line of living and non-living, right? Finally, right, I would say that there is a fine blur between living and non-living. Can you think of anything which could be an exception? Just take a minute and think about it. Absolutely, they are the viruses, right? So we know that viruses are nothing but they are certain structures which have, like a proteinaceous code, they have genetic material and everything of that sort. But we know that they have a fine line because we know that they require a host to carry it out. But the thing is, when the host is not there, they are almost as good as non-living, right? And only inside the host they are able to carry out functions like reproduction, growth, so on and so forth. Yes? So in this case, if you think about it, it's somewhere between living and non-living. And if you think about it, there are so much which is left yet to be discovered, I would say, right? We're still on the discovery, we're still on the path of trying to figure out so many mechanisms of the cell. What we know today is probably tip of the iceberg of how a cell really works. But we need to have this basic understanding because tomorrow, if we want to learn and explore more, we should be able to do this. So with this, everybody, I come to the end of today's class. Now, very quickly, any more doubts that all of you have? Or are we clear? Are your basics clear on what is a cell? Tomorrow when you say structural functional unit, now you know why, right? You know a lot about it. Ma'am, is microscope diagram important? They'll maximum ask you for identification. They won't ask you to draw. Yes. What is the structural organization of a cell? A cell has various biomolecules, right? So we see that they have carbohydrates, proteins, fats, nucleic acids, and they have a lot more. So we see that that is a structural composition, I would say. Ma'am, does our brain give instructions to the body to make cell? Very interesting question. But at the end of the day, your brain also that is there is made up of cells, right? So if our cell is growing and dividing, it's because of instructions which are coming in from other cells. It's coming to the nucleus. So that's a very complex reaction, I would say. Ma'am, are all fungi multicellular except yeast? See, yeast is a broad way of categorizing it, right? Yeast in itself, there are 300 or 3000 species of yeast. So there could be many. In that sense, there could be many multicellular fungi because many species are there. But if you talk about broadly, it is yeast, right? Yeast is the only unicellular fungi that is there. Does RBC have nucleus? Isha, no, RBC does not have nucleus. Ma'am, is virus a cell? You can't really call virus as a cell because it does not have the proper characteristics of a cell. So no, we cannot really call it as a cell per se. They are not prokaryotic either. Yes? How do substances move in and out? We will be having a separate class altogether on transportation, so don't worry about it. Spindle shape is when you have this kind of a structure, right? It is broad in the center, narrow at the tips. Okay, yeast is eukaryotic. Alright, ma'am, RBC, WBC and platelets are cells, but why do we feel it as liquid? Because cells are embedded in a fluid-like structure called as plasma. I'll be teaching you when I do tissues as well, so don't worry about it, okay? Yes, Deepthi, I know. Alright, okay. So with this, of course, everybody, I can see a lot of questions are coming. Ma'am, if cells divide, why do they not get smaller? User has asked me a very good question. Because when cells divide, they make a Xerox copy of themselves. It is not the division that you learn in math. If I have 3 cubes with me and I have to give 2 cubes to Ankita ma'am, how many cubes am I left with? 1. No, it's not literal division. It just means a Xerox copy. We'll be dealing with it in the later classes, so don't worry about it. Yes, yeast is eukaryotic. For a lot of you are asking, what is prokaryotic and eukaryotic? I will be teaching you, bacha, so don't worry about it. Yes? So with this, I am going to be ending today's class, but I'm going to end it with a homework question. Can we move me to the side, please? Okay, this is your homework question for today. Yes. This is your homework question on writing a short note of cell theory or write down the 3 points. A lot of you are asking me postulates. They are basically, you know, the statements which are given out, right? Yes. Competency is going to come for grade 9 also. It's going to come across 6 to 10. So competency questions will come for you guys as well. So this right here is your homework question and I am going to be checking your answers. Now see students, if you enjoyed this particular class and the way we teach here at BYJU'S, right? We don't just come and tell you that this is what is cell, this is some analogies, go learn it, your life becomes easy. No, you learn with visuals. So now of course tomorrow you will always remember the wooden blocks I showed you. You will always remember the story I showed you. Yes, we can bring me back to the side itself. So you will always remember this. Yes, so I request all of you to make sure that you always stay subscribed to the channel, right? So make sure you hit the subscribe button because the kind of learning you do here, visual and experiential learning, you will not find it anywhere else. And if you enjoyed today's class, I need you to tell me in the comments of this video what you enjoyed and how you're going to tell your friends about it as well. And hit the like button because that is also important, and do share it with your friends. So I will see you all very soon, everybody. But up until then, take care, lots of love, and bye-bye.